Howdy everyone, it's Sam. I hope you're doing really well. If you're new around here, I hope I can get you to consider liking the content and subscribing to the channel. And if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. This weekend is round 21 of the 2022 NRL season and not doing too bad recently. So let's get stuck into the tips. What? Already? Round 25 of the 2022 NRL season starts on Thursday night from CommBank Stadium. The Parramatta Eels are hosting the Melbourne Storm, and the Melbourne Storm are the favourites at $1.80 to the Parramatta Eels $2. There's no team list changes for the Parramatta Eels. The only difference for Melbourne is a couple of key switches, but it's Tom Eisenhuth, whose season is over, unfortunately. Therefore, Chris Lewis comes in. The reason why Eisenhuth's season is over is because of the hip drop tackle from Lindsay Collins, and by and large, that's Lindsay Collins' season over and done with as well. But we remain on the Eels and the Storm. Eels, obviously, we know have had the Melbourne Storm's number over the past couple of years. Melbourne Storm last week against the Sydney Roosters were a touch disappointing. It was a really fierce contest, one of the games of the season, but against the Parramatta Eels side that's beaten the Broncos, who are way out of whack, and the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, I should say, back to back. Hard to get a true proper read on the Eels, and I think at CommBank Stadium, the Eels are going to be a different beast. That headline, that tag has been used plenty of times this year. There is so much at stake, we know. If Melbourne Storm win, they could fly up into third position if the Cowboys don't do a good job this weekend. If Parramatta Eels win, they can swap over to fourth position. And it would be Penrith versus Parramatta, and the Storm would probably be hosting Canberra Raiders in a sudden death elimination final. There is a lot riding on this game. The Melbourne Storm error count and their ill discipline is what is making me very sheepish about tipping them. And for that reason, I think Parramatta Eels, they've got a little bit more confidence back. They got bashed by the Broncos and the Rabbits. I think it was in consecutive weeks, but anyway. And now they're just back on track again, and they're really going to concrete the premiership credentials to themselves, to the entire rugby league universe by the end of Thursday night. So Parramatta Eels 1-12 on Thursday. Friday night, there are two contests, and game number one is from a core stadium. It's the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs hosting the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles, and the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs are $1.50 favourites on Sportsbet, whereas the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles are $2.60 outsiders. Earlier this year, these two sides played. I think it was round 3 or round 4. It was a dour, sludging contest in the rain out at 4 Pints Park, and it was the Manly Sea Eagles that pipped the Bulldogs, who were in awful form at that stage as well. This could be something similar, especially if the rain pelts down. This is, as the Hello Sport gentleman would say, is going to be a poo slinger of a contest. There's a lot of changes, especially for Manly. So we'll go through the Bulldogs, the home side first. Avarillo is at fullback, Carraz and Carr are the wingers, and Shoop and Burns are the centres. Halves pairing remain the same in Burton and Flanagan. The back row, the forward pack is Max King, Paul Vaughan, Jeremy Marshall King, and then the back row was Waddell, who returns from injury, Raymond for Taylor Mariner, and Josh Jackson, and Zach Docker-Clay, Joe Stimson, Chris Patolo, and Tafita Pangai Jr. is in there at jersey number 17. And for the Manly Sea Eagles, KO Weeks is in at fullback, that pushes Talatau Kola out into the centres. I thought Kola was the best part of Manly Seagulls game last week against the Raiders in Canberra. But in any event, Kola moves into the centres and Brad Parker remains with jersey number 3. And the wingers for Manly are Raymond Tuamalo Vega and Tuapolotu. The halves pairing remain the same in DCE and Foreign. The forward pack for Manly is Sipley, Tapau and Croker. Olakawatu Davey returns from injury, I think it is, and Dylan Walker with jersey 13 on his back. The interchange is Ben Travojevic, Schuster, Bullymore, and Kurt DeLewis. I think the Bulldogs at home are going to put in big time. And if the Bulldog supporters really do get up and help their team across the line this weekend, I think the Doggies can actually beat Manly Sea Eagles, who are looking rather inexperienced in the back line. Same could be said for the Bulldogs as well, with the likes of Carraz in there, but I'm actually going to tip, even though the bookies have got the Bulldogs as $1.50 favourites, I still consider this quite a bit of an upset with the Bulldogs beating Seagulls this Friday night, especially considering the trajectory we thought Manly would go on at the start of the season. And I think Manly, there was a case where they weren't, but I think Manly now are officially the most disappointing team of 2022. For a stage there, I thought, well, gee whiz, Roosters and the Titans, yeah, they were disappointing, but the fall from grace that Manly have suffered, and some of it by their own doing, has been dreadful, and it's been quite alarming to see. And if I may put my 2 cents in, I think the talk about Des Hasler being shifted on, I don't think that is the right course of action. However, the way that Des Hasler's time at Canterbury Bankstown finished, while probably not as dramatic as what's going on at Manly at the moment, there is similarities. There are striking similarities in the way that things are going down at Brookvale, like it did go down at Belmore a couple of years ago when Des was in charge of the reins. So I'm going to tip the Bulldogs to win this game. I think they'll actually have a bit too many points in them, which is strange to say. And you know, they while Cronulla weren't good, the Bulldogs really stuck it to him. It was 10-0 for the longest time last week. So Bulldogs 1-12 on Friday night against Manly. Then the main event of not just Friday night, but of the entire weekend. The Sydney Roosters are hosting the South Sydney Rabbitohs from the brand spanking new Allianz Stadium, and the Sydney Roosters are $1.80 favourites to the South Sydney Rabbitohs $2. These two sides did meet, of course, earlier on in the season, and the Rabbitohs still to this point put in their most impressive performance of the entire year. But the Roosters are a different looking team nowadays. They are on a 7-game winning streak and they look so angry, and I'm not surprised by it. I'm even terrified by it a little bit. Going into the team list news now, Victor Radley will miss this game via concussion. Awful scenes last week. The feed should have been swapped over, or the camera angle should have been swapped over immediately, but it didn't. So bad on Channel 9 in that instance, just quickly. Lindsay Collins, his season could be done via a 4-week suspension for executing a hit drop tackle. And it's Daniel Tupou as well. That's the other man that's going to miss this game. He's going to miss through a groin injury. So what that does to the Roosters, Momirovski goes in place of Daniel Tupou and will partner Drew Hutchison, who I think has done a very, very admirable job in the centres, not a regular position of his. And of course, Manu and Suali'i. And Suali'i is going to be marking up on Alex Johnston. That's an awesome one-on-one battle. And then the halves pairing remains the same in Kieran Walker. And then the forward pack reads Waria Hargreaves, Lodge and Ferrells. Hasn't Matt Lodge been quite the signing for the Roosters, eh? And then the back row is Crichton, Nat Butcher, and Siwa Takiaho is starting in the lock position this weekend. And then the interchange bench reads Connor Watson, Butcher, Baker, and May. Shifting over to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, there was an element of doubt around Latrell Mitchell, but he has been named in jersey number 1. He should play. I reckon he will play this Friday night. And then the wingers for the South Sydney Rabbitohs, the aforementioned Alex Johnston and Tane Milne. And then the centre pairing, Isaiah Tass and Jackson Pavlo, comes back into the side after being dropped last weekend. And then the halves pairing remains the same in Walker and Ilias. The forward pack is as expected. Then the interchange bench for the South Sydney Rabbitohs reads Mamazoulis, Mark Nichols, Hame Sele, and Michael Cheekham. Flip a freaking coin. The exclusion of Victor Radley is going to be massive because I've really started to take a lot of notice, and maybe it's because he's in really good touch. His ball playing, Victor Radley, I know it's always been there, and I have seen it in patches, but I don't think it's actually been quite as sparkling as what it had been for the past month or so. So that's a massive exclusion. And Takeaho, I think he can do a little bit of ball playing, but not as crisp as what Radley does indeed offer. This is one of them games that Latrell Mitchell, for lack of a better term, owes South Sydney. As I said, there were doubts about him playing this weekend, but he has been named, and I'm sure he will. And that would have been pretty disappointing if he didn't back up and play, considering he missed half the season or a quarter of the season up until this point as well. South Sydney last week, they were off a touch. Sydney Roosters were at their most aggressive frame of mind that I think any of us have seen throughout the entire year last week, and I'm glad I tipped the Sydney Roosters as well. And there's a piece of me, there's one half of my brain that says Trent Robinson is not going to allow the Sydney Roosters to lose their first ever home game at Allianz Stadium, to lose a game against South Sydney Rabbitohs at Allianz Stadium. I just don't see it happening. But South Sydney, man, they have proven over the past few years to spring surprise beltings on the Sydney Roosters, but I think the Roosters are just done a little bit too good a touch at the moment. This really is still a flip of the coin. It's going to be super exciting, and me and my mother, we've got tickets to the game and we'll be there for it. Should be a spectacular occasion. The weather also says that there could be showers on Friday night, but I said that last weekend and it was as dry as a bone. I just can't go past that Sydney Roosters will lose this game. I just don't think it's going to happen. Trent Robinson will have something. I think Tedesco is going to be insane. Sydney Roosters are going to win this one in a beauty, 1-12 on Friday night. On Super Saturday, there are 3 contests, and game number 1 is from Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland. New Zealand Warriors are hosting the Gold Coast Titans, and the Warriors, rightfully so, are $1.54 favourites to the Gold Coast Titans, $2.50. There are team list changes for both sides. Reece Walsh plays his final game in Warriors colours before shifting to the Broncos next season, and the wingers are DWZ and Montoya, and the centre pairing is Rocco Berry and Jesse Arthurs. The halves pairing is Sean Johnson, even though he had some injury concerns over a calf, but he's been named in the halfback position, and the 5'8" is Chanel Harris-Tavita, who by and large probably will play his last game for the New Zealand Warriors for at least a year or so anyway. Then we move into the forward pack, and for Fanua Blake, Tohu Harris and Wade Egan are the front row, and then the back row is Ewan Aitken, who returns from personal reasons, Josh Curran and Bunty Afoa, and then the interchange bench reads Freddie Lussick, Ben Murdoch-Masila, Alicia Katoa and Tom Ale. And then shifting over to the Gold Coast Titans now, Jaden Campbell is at fullback with Marzu and Thompson as the wingers, and the centre pairing is Philip Sami, and Jojo Fafita moves into the centres. And then the halves pairing is AJ and Boyd. And then shifting over into the forward pack is Fodawaker, Fasua Mala'awi and Sam McIntyre, and the back row for the Titans reads Fafita, Fermor and Liu, and the interchange bench for them reads Turner, SASA, Jamin Jolliffe and Khaleesi Haas. Titans attack did look good, but they switched off a little bit in that second half. They allowed Newcastle Knights to score 26 points. Newcastle haven't done that too many times in 2022. The Warriors last weekend, I thought they put in a pretty good performance, at least in that first half. They were up 6-0, and I don't think the halftime score against the Panthers last week reflected how good of an effort the Warriors actually put in against the against the Panthers last week. This game, I get the feeling that the Titans could ambush them a little bit. The Warriors, though, at home is the safe option, but just don't know. There's a piece of me that thinks the Warriors, they have been mostly off up until, last week a little bit. So they could actually rest on their laurels a little bit by being back at Mount Smart Stadium, and getting done in by the Gold Coast Titans, who obviously are playing their final game of the year. But I'm going to tip the New Zealand Warriors 1-12, just simply because they're at home. And if this was up in Gold Coast territory, I'd be tipping the Gold Coast Titans. But because it's at home, I'm going to tip the Warriors 1-12 on Saturday. The second game on Super Saturday is from Netstrata Jubilee Stadium in Cogra. St George Illawarra Dragons are hosting the Brisbane Broncos, and the Broncos are $1.60 favourites, and the St George Illawarra Dragons are $2.35, and that's on sportsbet.com.au. The St George Illawarra Dragons have no team list changes, but Josh Maguire does play his final game in the NRL until before he moves over to Super League, and it's up against one of his old sides in the Brisbane Broncos as well. For the Brisbane Broncos, it's like, you do say it's all or nothing, but like, they've got to rely on Tigers showing up, and then they got to rely on, well, not rely, they got to produce over 50 points to try and change that for and against. That is not in favour of the Broncos. But the Broncos team list changes. Tyson Gamble is in for the first time in a while. He starts with jersey number 6 on his back. Selwyn Coppo, is back in. And on the interchange bench, at the hooker position, Jake Turpin plays his final game for the Brisbane Broncos as well. But I would probably argue that Corey Pakes should feel hard done by here. I think the Broncos should easily move forward with Corey Pakes from 2023 onwards. And also the big inclusion is Pat Carrigan. But I think the Brisbane Broncos will win this game. There's just too much on the line. And the Dragons, gee whiz, I said 13 plus against the Tigers, and they scraped by with a victory over them. Dragons were really poor, man. So I think they will be up for it. It's the final game of the year. It's a team that they could really crush the soul of as well, and be positive about the finish to their season. But I do think the Brisbane Broncos will win this one 1-12. But gee whiz, man, gee whiz. It's just, the damage has been done, hasn't it? So Brisbane Broncos 1-12 on Super Saturday. Two games on Sunday, and game number 1 is from McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. Newcastle Knights are hosting Cronulla Sutherland Sharks, and the Sharkies are $1.15 favourites to the Newcastle Knights, $5.50 outsiders. Newcastle Knights team list it's not unchanged. Anthony Milford is out, and Phoenix Crossland is the 5'8", who partners Adam Clune in the halves. And then for the Cronulla Sharks, Kyle Iro is out, and Matt Ikuvalu comes in. Dale Finucane has been named on the reserves list, and Connor Tracy could have played, but he was chosen to be someone that rested a week before finals. This has a smell of the same sort of scoreline that these two had about four or 6 years ago, sort of thing, where the Sharkies, I think, defeated the Knights like 64-6 in the final round, or something to that degree anyway. Newcastle Knights are they're just dead set. They are friggin' fried, the Newcastle Knights. They really are. The Cronulla Sharks should really win this one by 18 plus, like fair dinkum. So Cronulla Sharks to win this one easily on Sunday. Final game of the regular season is from Leichhardt Oval. The West Tigers host the Canberra Raiders, and the Canberra Raiders find themselves as favourites. at $1.31, and the West Tigers are $3.50 outsiders. For team listeners, changes for the West Tigers. James Tarmo comes back in and could play his final game of the year. I stress could, we don't know. Also, Luke Garner comes back and he's playing in the center position, and Ken Momalo comes back as well. Tyron Peachy has also been named on the interchange bench. And then over to the Raiders now. Nick Chotrich replaces Albert Hopewati. So Chotrich is back, and that's it for the Canberra Raiders. There have been a couple of occasions over the 10 years or so that the West Tigers have hosted a team at Leichhardt Oval in the final round of the season. And one of those teams was the Canberra Raiders back in 2016. And the Raiders put 50 points on them in that contest. And if the Brisbane Broncos do win against the Dragons the night previously, Raiders must win. They don't need to win by, they only need to win by the 1 point, you know, but it is absolutely must win, otherwise they will miss out on finals footy. So the Raiders, they cannot take the Tigers lightly. There cannot be any air of arrogance. The attitude must be switched on, but the Tigers, man, just complete brain snaps, especially that Pauga incident where the Dragons short drop out and he's standing 2 meters inside the 10-meter line, that young Pauga, and touch the ball like fair dinkum. So I think they could find a bit of positivity with Garner defending in the centres. He's usually been pretty good for them when he defends as a centre, but maybe not so much in attack. And this is Luke Garner's final game as well for the West Tigers before he moves over to the Penrith Panthers. So I'm going to tip the Canberra Raiders to win this one 13+, unfortunately, West Tigers fans, and therefore Raiders will finish inside the top 8. Alrighty, so in regards to Cowboys versus Panthers match preview and hearing my thoughts on the contest, I am going to be a very special guest on the Big Cat Chat podcast with Jack Martin and Natalie Sinclair, two diehards of the Panthers, and you can find that podcast later on this week, so go subscribe to the Big Cat Chat. You can find them on Twitter, on Instagram, subscribe to them on Apple and Spotify, which is where you will find the podcast. I will leave a link to the Big Cat Chat podcast link tree, and there you can hear our chat. And if you do recall, I did host Jack and Natalie on this channel earlier in the year to preview the Panthers Cowboys at Bluebet, but obviously their contest is happening up at QCB this weekend. So thank you to them for having me, and thank you all very much for the continued support. The regular season is done and dusted, and it's gone by like that. So again, thank you all very much for the continuous support. It's been a great year, and we're only going to get bigger and better. So thank you all very much, and I'll talk to you guys later. Adios.